Hey everyone, my name is Kaya Savas. I'm the founder of Film.Music.Media, and welcome to our Melody Makers panel. I'm excited to speak to these amazing composers and songwriters about making music for the screen and stage. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. First up, we have a songwriter from the Muppets Mayhem. Please welcome Hannah Friedman. Hey, Hannah.
Hello.
Good to see you. Next, we have the writer for the Untitled, Unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical. Please welcome Joe Iconis. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Hey, all right. So next we have the composer from Super Y, and Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. Please welcome Stefan L. Smith.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. And last but not least, we have a Voodoo Highway Music Group composer from Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Please welcome Brian Pickett.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Brian. All right. So to start off, since all of you have somewhat different backgrounds in music, I was wondering, if you could each just talk us through your roles and your current projects, and specifically what are you handling musically on this project. So I don't know, Hannah, if you want to maybe kick us off.
Yeah, I'm working on an animated musical right now. And I'm also writing a Pixar movie. So different facets of writing, but all musical storytelling. And yeah, it's been really fun.
Absolutely. Brian, how about yourself? I know you juggle a lot over there at Voodoo, so I'm curious how many hats you're wearing.
Quite a few. We have so we also do Paw Patrol. That's our main, I guess, biggest show maybe, and then Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Yeah, I'm songwriter and score, composer, I guess, whatever you call it, along with two other guys, James Chappell and Graham Cornies.
Yeah.
And we kind of split all duties. We songwrite and we write the underscore for all of them. On a couple of the shows, I am also kind of usually the guy who kind of divvies up stuff, assigns the different themes to different guys. It's part of working with a group. So
yeah, absolutely. No, you guys do such an amazing job. We just had James on our animation panel, so we were talking. Yeah, it was great. Joe, how about yourself?
So I have a few projects kind of in the cooker. So I work predominantly in theater, and so my life is kind of like always negotiating shows that are about to go into production or shows that have already gone into production and trying to find the next production for them. But on those shows, I tend to write the music and the lyrics and sometimes the script. And so the last thing I did was the aforementioned Untitled, Unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical. So we just did a production of that, looking for another one. And I wrote a musical called Be More Chill that we're turning into a movie. And I'm working on a whole bunch of other songwriting projects, both on stage and on film and in live performance arenas and whatnot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Stefan, how about yourself?
my most recent project, Super Y, I kind of was like Brian in the sense where I was a songwriter and composer. So it was 20 episodes, 20 original songs, and scoring the episodes on top of that. So kind of wearing all the hats there, but I did have a great team to assist on that as well.
Absolutely. So I'm curious about everyone's kind of general approach, especially on the initial stages of writing music for, whether it's a film or a show or a stage production. So I'm curious, kind of what are the starting points? Is it for, and you can, and everybody can just use kind of their specific project that they were kind of talking about. Like, what was the starting point for getting into it? Was it talking with your director, talking with your producer, or viewing some art or a first cut, or for stage? I'm curious what the starting point is. So maybe for stage, Joe, I'm curious for theater. Maybe you want to kick us off about kind of what is usually the initial starting point when you're starting to write and get into the world.
Yeah, I mean, for the sort of stuff that I do, which is a little bit like left of center stuff in the world of theater, it usually starts. The projects I've done have usually started with me, and so usually started with like an idea that I had, or a book I read that I was inspired by, or a personal obsession that I had, like Hunter S. Thompson, that I thought, oh, this would make an interesting musical. But as far as the actual process of like writing for me, it always starts with the characters who populate whatever the story is. So whether that's a musical, or whether that's a movie where I'm going to write a song for it, it's always about the characters who are singing the song. And that usually dictates both the lyrical style, the musical style, and that's kind of like the cornerstone of writing for me.
Absolutely. Stefan, how about yourself? What's kind of your entry point, whether it's Super Why or Batman? Like, kind of where do you typically like to start? If you know, especially if you have the leeway of doing it, if you like to do it early, or I'm sure with animation it's usually different. But I'm curious, you know, what's your usual starting point? How you kind of get into a project?
I mean, the last two projects, they kind of started pretty early, as far as like getting me involved. So with Super Y in particular, we started on the songs like months before we even started on scoring. So every episode's kind of different in style. So there's like funk, pop, rock stuff all over the place within the same episode. And so we kind of established that tone first. So the score kind of wrote itself based on that. So once the songs were devised, like, then it was just, you know, sitting down with Jerry, the director, and determining like, all right, so where the key hit points, you know, traditional spotting. And then from there, figuring out like how we kind of tie everything together to make it feel seamless, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
it's a process, but we all know how that is.
Right.
Yeah.
Hannah, how about yourself, especially with something like, you know, Muppets Mayhem, which does have songs, and I'm curious kind of what's your entry point and kind of how do you start building your musical world?
We definitely referenced older Muppets material because the Muppets is a universe and we want everything to live within that universe. And then we did a lot of research with the puppeteers and the characters, and they had all these long backstories about New Orleans jazz. And so we, you know, they really take their characters and their instrumentation very seriously. So we listened to like Professor Longhair and Dr. John and all kinds of really awesome inspo so that we could understand the vibe that the characters were writing in so that we could access that.
Yeah, I mean, the Muppets, I mean, they've lived with pop culture for decades, so they have this really big history. So it is interesting to come in and be like, they seem like, you know, brand new, it's a brand new series or whatever, but it's like these are like really old characters that have, you know, a certain feel, a certain tone for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Brian, how about yourself? You know, especially when you're working in children's animation or something like that, where I'm curious about your kind of starting point and getting into a world.
Similar to Stefan, we were in season 7, or we just finished the songs for season 7 of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and each episode has 4 songs in it. And I think the first season had 40 episodes, and then every subsequent season has between 20 and 40 episodes. So it's gotten ridiculous as far as reference tracks and stuff. We always ask for a reference track, and I'm just talking about the songwriting process. And and you know, you don't rip it off, obviously, but you take from the style and you hope it inspires you to write something new instead of writing the same thing. Because again, I don't know what it's 300 or 400 songs now for one series, and we got a shorthand now with them. They give us all the information we need. We said this is all that we need to know to write a song. We write, you know, a pass, usually a minute long song, send it back. Sometimes they'll throw us back to the drawing board and be like, you know, the Rick Astley reference was wrong. You know what I mean? Which happened. I got a Rick Astley reference in the last season. So yeah, as far as songs go, we're happy. I'm happy to say we're in most of the shows we work on. We're so far along that we're at a really comfortable place with the clients. I no longer worry about being fired or anything like that. So it's nice. And just the shorthand's there, and they really let us just do our thing, which is really nice.
How do you kind of how do you kind of keep yourself inspired when you're doing that many songs and the amount, like where you mentioned Rick Astley, do you kind of look for genres and stylings around and different artists to kind of inspire you to write in those kind of little worlds?
That's basically it. And then every once in a while, you know, I'd say every year or a couple of times a year, you'll hear something that, you know, really inspires you. Like, you know, Greatest Showman. I heard the songs from the Greatest Showman. That kept me going for a couple of months. I was like, those are awesome. And the Rick Astley one obviously threw me for a loop. I think we got Run DMC once and all that. You know, and this is a goal for kids under 4,
right?
4 and under. So yeah, I think that's what just finding new inspiration maybe is what keeps it going. And luckily the seasons are usually broken up a year apart. So by the end of the season, you're pretty empty. The tank is empty. For songs. Then you get to do the score, like Stefan said, a year later. You know, and then it starts again. Maybe after 2 years, you get to write another 80 songs. So, and hopefully you're feeling the energy again. So
absolutely, yeah. Well, I want to jump over to Hannah. You know, Hannah, you mentioned about, looking at the characters for the Muppets. So I'm curious, since they are known for kind of their humor and their charm and their personalities, and besides just kind of using those to inform the musical decisions, I'm curious, how do you kind of approach those qualities, especially, I guess, tonally, into the music, and make sure that the songs or the music really kind of matches to those characters, when especially for Muppets Mayhem?
Yeah, well, Dr. Teeth, who's the headliner of Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, he's very loquacious and he makes up a lot of fun, groovalicious phrases. So we definitely made sure to incorporate that. And Bill, our EP, was in the writer's room, so we got to hear him all the time, the way that he would talk and sort of the cadence that Dr. Teeth talks in. And that's also how he sings and performs. So we definitely tried to make sure that we incorporated that humor. And there's also just a spirit of the Muppets that is positive and is sort of community oriented, and you feel that from all of their music. So that was something we wanted to infuse, so that it would be, a part of the canon and stand alongside all those other songs. And then like a playfulness, I think, like even in arrangement, we tried to be playful with like some of the horn hits, and just imagining, like we have a drum part that's not humanly possible because animals playing it. So it's okay that it was a little bit like exuberant, and you would need like 10 hands to play it, because we know that character.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I want to piggyback on kind of my next question about, like, I mean, you kind of talked about a little bit about taking inspiration from other parts of a project, such as writing or characters or story world, which you talked about kind of focusing on the puppeteers and kind of, and the characters themselves. I'm curious, in Muppets, was there anything else that kind of informed or helped you kind of inspire the music? Was there anything about the sets or the way just the general tone, or maybe the way it was shot or edited? I'm curious, like, how did that kind of, is there anything else that helped you with the music?
Oh yeah, I mean, just the whole vibe, like Dave Goles, who's a puppeteer who plays Gonzo, like he's an original puppeteer and worked with Jim Henson, and that whole vibe of community, and of like we're just going on the road and we'll pick up a guitar wherever we are. Like that is so much a part of their ethos as performers and creators. And just like someone picking up a tambourine and kind of a jam session feeling. So that was definitely part of the writing process that we took into the studio. And when we were jamming, we tried to keep it loose. We tried to use a lot of raw instrumentation when we could. It was a little less produced than other kinds of tracks, because that was just the vibe of the band that was very clear from everything you're saying, from the sets, from the costumes, and from the messiness of, like, I think there's sort of an unapologetic messiness to some Muppet stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's what's so charming about some of those characters, is they just kind of show up and they are who they are. And that gave us a little bit of extra permission to write a lyric and say, like, I don't know, is this too silly? No, let's try it. Let's just see. Is this like a silly riff? Nah, let's throw it in, see how it, like, put it in the mix. So I think it definitely influenced the soup.
Absolutely. Stefan, how about yourself? I'm curious, where do you draw inspiration from once you're in the project? Are you looking at the script if you're on early enough? Are you waiting for that final, lock picture to kind of see the way that the edit's coming together? I'm curious, what inspires you to kind of turn the image into music?
I think it's all the above, like depending on how early you are in the project. If you have the luxury of getting the script, once you get locked picture, it could be completely different. So it's like, it's good to start off as like, primary inspiration. But I think what I like to do is compile playlists with the director of things that I just really feel like fit the tone. And it could be, classical, non-classical, whatever, just anything that would get us there. So we're both actively listening to that. So when we sit down, we kind of have a vocabulary to speak with, if that makes sense, instead of trying to find the voice, mid-project. So and then from that, then using the elements on screen, hit points in dialogue or major beats that they want to emphasize, and then using that as kind of like our roadmap to designing the cue. And then from that, it's just, kind of, I don't know, for me, a lot of times the cues just end up writing themselves, which is weird to say, once you have all those basic parameters in place, you know where your hit points are, you can kind of figure out how the tempo should be from there, and where you need to hit certain things kind of governs what the piece is, going to say. And so I don't fight it. I just go with it. And then if they love it, they do. If they don't, then we revise.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that approach, because I was talking to recently, I did the liner notes for I think it was The Weatherman in The Ring with Gore Verbinski and Hans, and Gore was kind of talking about, like, once you start working on a project, it kind of takes on its own identity and tells you what it needs, and it pretty much is like it becomes an entity where you're like, we no longer controlling it. It's like, oh, I've built something and now it's kind of alive, and it really, you're just kind of feeding it what it's telling you to feed. And I think that's exactly kind of what you were pointing out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And do you find that playlists are kind of a great way to maybe communicate with directors who don't know how to vocalize maybe what they want, or something like that? Is that just like way common ground?
Always. Like, I mean, it's something that I always do, just because it takes that factor out. They're not saying like, oh, I don't like that trombone and it's a piccolo. Like, they're not focused on those things. Like, it's like they're focused on the sound and the sound world, and everyone can connect with that emotionally. So it's our issue to figure out the instrumentation, orchestration to match what they're hearing. But I think we can get closer to that when there's tangible audio stuff that they can listen to and grab onto and say, well, I love that. How do we get close to that? And that gets you in a closer ballpark than trying to figure out, oh, do they like this instrument? Would they like this together? Or like, you just kill yourself,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, how about you from the kind of the stage perspective? How do you what is inspiring you throughout your process?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of similar where because the music in my projects is sort of fulfilling a whole bunch of different things, right? Where it's like it's telling you about who a character is, what they're going through. It's also telling you about like the world that the show is taking place in, the time, all that stuff. I always make playlists for myself, even and it's a lot of times it's like songs that feel like they're in the either the time period or like the musical world of the show. So like for my Hunter S. Thompson musical, lots of the show takes place at like mid 60s through like late 70s. And Hunter Thompson, it was the sort of counterculture hero, so he really sort of like intersected with a lot of the kind of like classic psychedelic druggy rock of that time. So like sort of having access to those sounds and to those the chord structures and the lyrics and just sort of have that in my head constantly sort of gave me like a base to work from. And then it was like, okay, I have this base of this sort of like mid-century 70s 80s rock sound. Now what can I bring to it that makes it feel kind of timeless, that makes it feel both like contemporary and also like it could have been written in the 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever. And so it becomes like a sort of wider breadth of influences. And also I'm hugely influenced by film when I write anything, but especially with the Hunter Thompson show. And so I'm a huge Robert Altman fan. Robert Altman, who made Nashville and Three Women and Shortcuts and The Player, and
Popeye.
and Popeye, Harry Knowles, one of my faves. And actually Hunter was also super influenced by the Muppets, by especially like early Muppets and the Muppet Show. And it is sort of like the the thing that Hannah was just talking about, this sort of like ragtag intentional messiness, like the sloppiness. I feel like so much art in general these days feels very sanitized. It feels very corporate to me. It feels very made by committee in rooms.
Sure.
And something I always loved about the Muppets was this sort of thing where it really felt like it was made by human beings and it was purposefully rough around the edges. And that kind of vibe is something that I try to do with all of my work, but especially with the Hunter show for sure.
It's funny, you see that like even today, where like even YouTube creators, when their channels maybe blow up and they get better cameras and better things and things look polished, and even like fans are like, I love that when you're doing it out of your garage, it felt more authentic, back then.
Yeah, no, it's such a thing, but it's like I've obviously put out albums and and recordings of my stuff, even though I'm mostly doing live things. But it's really like it really blew my mind when I realized, like, oh, people now hear a clean tuned sound, an artificial sound, as like correct. And so a human sounds incorrect to people. And that's like the most no-brainer thing of all time. And it took me years to realize that. It was like, wait a minute. You mean like that just the human voice sounds like weird to kids? And it does. It's like it's very wild to me. But
oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brian, for you, I know you mentioned like looking at others genres and styles for inspirations, but I'm curious, especially when you work on a show that's been kind of going and going, and you kind of feel like you're kind of you got the pattern down, kind of the production workflow down. I'm curious for you, where do you look for inspiration to keep things fresh, and where do you look for musically, not just with the songs but score? I'm curious, like, how do you keep filling yourself with inspiration?
Well, keeping things fresh, it's a little bit tricky, but no, I think the benefit of working with a small team and working on so many different shows is that you do kind of have a fresh approach every day. Like, I was just thinking, the differences of, like, for example, one show we do is we do the Total Drama Island series, which is all a spoof of reality series.
Right.
And the music is so over the top, Fate of the World. If you ever listen to reality shows, you'll know the music is not really suitable for what's happening, but it works somehow. And then you can spend a day working on Daniel Tiger, which is such a nice mellow. I mean, the music's not sole purpose. One of the purposes of the music is to relax, is to tone down anxiety and settle down, basically calm children, which is a hard thing to, but music is a big part of it in that show. And it's just, I guess you could say it goes, I like to change gears a lot, I think, is what it's come down to after all these years. And it's worked for me, I think. Maybe having a little bit of ADHD as a kid or something, I don't know. I now, like, if we have we always try to find too much to do. So we're just starting to now try to turn down some work. And,
right.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty meandering answer, I'm afraid. So
no, it's great. Absolutely. I want to jump over back to Joe. Joe, with I love the collaborative process. I love everything from stage to screen to games. It's all collaboration. So I'm curious, can you discuss kind of with developing the Unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical, who were some of your biggest, I guess, collaborators during the process of getting that thing up and running? And then so I'm curious about who you're working with and what the team aspect looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So, musicals take a very long time. The Hunter S. Thompson musical, I was commissioned to write by La Jolla Playhouse, which is, one of the preeminent theaters in America. A million shows started there. Tommy, Jersey Boys, Come From Away, lots of stuff. They commissioned me to write it in 2007. And it was produced / premiered a few months ago. Over the summer. That is an uncommonly long time, but it's not like crazy. When I say like, oh yeah, it's commissioned 15 years ago, to people in the theater, they're kind of like, oh, that's long, but no one's like, what, 15 years?
I'm like, what? Because I was still in college.
It's pretty nuts, man. So, through that time, I went through a bunch of different collaborators. The whole time I was writing the music and the lyrics, and we had different people writing the script of the show. And then eventually, during the pandemic, I took over the script writing myself, which is sort of what got us to the show, being produced. But the director, Chris Ashley, who's an amazing director, who directed a production of the Rocky Horror Show that I saw in college on Broadway, that completely just like knocked me out. He has been the director of the show the whole time. And so he's been sort of like the collaborator that I've had, by my side. And as the show has evolved and as the world has changed like so many times over the course of 15 years, he's sort of been the constant as far as like other, members of the team. But like the wildest thing about the show is that it is, essentially a musical that uses the story of the life story of Hunter S. Thompson is kind of like a framework to talk about America in the 60s, America today. But it being unauthorized, I couldn't actually use any literal Hunter S. Thompson writing in the show. And so my job kind of became about how do I infect the show with the spirit of this person who is a huge personality, this person who has lots of like really obsessive diehard fans, who had such a strong style. How do I make it feel like the show itself has him in its veins without actually quoting him? So it was like he was both like my biggest collaborator and the person who I was the most afraid of actually collaborating with during this whole process.
Yeah, it's fun. I just recently rewatched like I think Conan back in the late night show. He did like a remote piece with him. They're just firing guns in like his backyard, like, and he's just like such a character. So I'm curious about that. I mean, because you see that all the time in unauthorized, blah blah blah. So that's just that mean just simply that you didn't get the rights to use his work and all that stuff. So it's essentially you don't have like the estate, like you're not like, as part of the production, right?
Yeah, essentially, it's a lot of like the movie musical biopics that you see, they are authorized, and so if you're hearing like the people's songs in the movie, they're probably authorized, which usually means that those stories follow a very clear map of how they go, and the person comes from nothing and then they're discovered and then maybe they have an affair or they're like an asshole to someone and then they get redeemed and then they like win an award at the end and everyone's happy. And so that was like so not the thing that I wanted to do with the Hunter S. Thompson musical. And so from the get-go, it kind of felt like there's no world where this is going to be authorized. And then eventually his estate was like, listen, you're never going to be able to afford any of these rights to do this musical. And so just do it unauthorized and don't quote any of the stuff and we won't sue you probably. And so that's basically what we did. Because Hunter S. Thompson was such a renegade and such a rebel, it felt like, let's not only have this show, be unauthorized, and let's not only have this show really be infected with this rebel spirit, but let's actually put it in the title, and let's not even give it a title. Let's call it the Untitled, Unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical. And so we just kind of really embraced the fact that
I think he would love that actually.
I think so, and we've had a few people who knew him and who are sort of in his world who have seen the show and have really felt like it certainly seems like he hated musicals, and like as I was doing press for the show, that people love to, ask like, what do you think Hunter S. Thompson would have thought about this musical? And I always had to be like, he probably would have hated it because he would have hated, being in a theater and hearing people sing, but he probably would have it like the least that he ever would have hated a musical. So that's what I think it would be his least favorite musical of all time.
Absolutely. Well, I want to jump back and go around again because I think the pacing and rhythm is such an important part of kind of building out a structure, a narrative structure, and especially when it comes with songs and score, that can be such an integral part of finding that pace and finding that rhythm, especially if you're writing songs beforehand and then having that the narrative kind of built around them and then kind of supplementing the score. So maybe Brian, if you want to kick us off, I'm curious when it comes to writing songs and finding like. Are you guys discussing like how long each song is and where they're going to be placed, and does that help build a structure for an episode or something like that? I'm just curious. And is it like once you find that it works, is it just kind of repeating that, or is it change from episode to episode?
Well, we usually have the script from the beginning, so you can see the song in the in the build of the episode. So it is important to consider where it lands in the episode and if the energy is going to be too much for this early or whatever. And in the case of Daniel Tiger, the songs usually come back about 5 other times. Just they'll sing the little chorus back to you. So we try to make sure the songs are catchy enough and not annoying enough that the parents will actually like them, if that makes sense. So, as far as pacing and as far as score, I think it's almost the biggest challenge for us is trying to figure out where not to put music. I think our intention, our instincts are always to add more and more to these episodes, and that's I think something I've just gotten comfortable over the last, I've been doing it for over 20 years now. And I think over the last 5 years, I've finally gotten comfortable with not having music for large sections and all that.
Yeah, I think it's important to know when to pull back and make sure that something can breathe, even with preschool entertainment. Because I remember I work at Cartoon Network Studios, and I remember we had a show that didn't, was kind of scrapped after one season because it was just like, and I don't think this was the reason, but I was going back, it's like it was nonstop, and it was like that 11-minute was just like wall to wall of dialogue or music, and there was like no room to breathe. And I think it was just like, oh, it was just like a little bit too strong, comes out too strong. I like what you're mentioning.
Yeah, it definitely makes the music that is there more effective if you aren't wall to wall, in my opinion. Yeah, absolutely. Hannah, do you do you feel like with Muppet Mayhem, how do you make sure the songs fit with the pacing of an episode, and are the songs themselves kind of just like almost like a musical number, or is it also telling the story? Is the scene? I mean, I'm curious, like how do you kind of fit in with the whole edit narrative?
They all served a different purpose, so we definitely looked at them in the context of the episode and also in the context of the larger structure of the whole series. So like we knew we wanted the big musical reunion moment to be epic. So we sort of built back from there, and we wanted to have a more personal, like back to Dr. Teeth Root's song in the flashback episode where we meet his parents. And then there's also, because it's Muppets, just, fun comedy bits. So there was a episode where they have a lot of middles, but they don't have beginnings or ends to songs. So then we just got to riff on like crazy middles of songs that don't exist. And then we also did some really fun covers that went through the emotional montages, or like sort of dovetailing different story points together. So yeah, the music served so many different purposes in the show, as well as the theme underneath the whole show of like, we're a band, we're a family, we harmonize together. So there were a lot of different ways to use that, and also to have it be discordant. Like the idea for one of the episodes is that they are having difficulty as a band. So then like the music starts to clash, the score starts to be less harmonious. And yeah, it was fun to kind of zoom out and then pick all the different ways that music could inform the emotion of the show. And I think we tried to be really broad about like touching all those different, like, more musical theater approaches, more just like straight covers, and then having a big, like the gang's all here moment at the end.
Right. And do you, I know when you're, I guess, mapping out the whole structure of an episode, is that the song placement happen? Is it already in that script phase, like Brian says, like there's space for those songs in the script, or is it in the spotting session where like, okay, we're going to save this area for a song, and then you have to go do that? And how much does it change in post when there's, when you film something, maybe something changes on set and it goes, oh, now we have maybe 2 minutes for a song instead of 2.5 minutes. I'm curious, like, how do you adapt to like all those, how that the whole process?
Yeah,
I guess,
because it's a musical show, it played a bigger part than in other shows that I've worked on. And there would be a story point that had to be hit in the song. So, she needs to be thinking about her mother in this song. And then at the end, Janice comes in and they reunite, and she is reminded of the importance of family. So it was a pretty big early on story point. And then we got to riff on the different references and, is this a moment to do a cover song that we really know and love and has a reference point in our collective consciousness? Or is this a moment to create something brand new? And we also solicited, there were like different contributors, and also old Muppet songwriters who contributed. So there was a really nice community sense, that we were like gathering different kinds of resources for those different moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Stefan, how about you? What's kind of your general approach to pacing and structure, especially with songs and score, and making sure like it all works and it's all feels seamless?
I think Superwise approach is kind of similar to what Brian was talking about, how it was kind of baked in the script already. And I assume it's kind of like your show, that it's curriculum based for little kids. So a lot of the songs in this series was, basically teaching kids how to read and phonetic things and stuff. So it's so important that the lyrics be very, upfront and the
Yeah.
music couldn't be too bombastic to clear, to make way for the material that they need to learn. So it was always like tiptoeing that balance of like, all right, the curriculum is the vocal, the main vocal, everything else, supports that. So a lot of the pacing and stuff was directly affected by whatever the lyrics were and how much you could hear that. So, and then the style, depending on where we wanted to go, the director he loves those 1970s, like, Superfly funk type of sound. And so he wanted to go completely that direction, which the original series is, very 1-4-5-1 kids music. So it was just like a completely different approach throughout the series, like pacing, rhythmically, everything. So I think seeing how it works within the script obviously is the deciding factor, because what Brian said, you don't want to just, the floodgates of heaven are open when it's supposed to be a tender moment. So just knowing what you're writing first, and then also how it's going to be manipulated. Like our songs were recorded in one long pass, so it may be like a 1 minute to 2 minute song, and then once we get into the cut, that's broken up all throughout the episode. So you also have to keep in mind that where is this going to be played again in the episode, and how is it going to be affected musically by what's going on in the picture. So I guess it's just like a lot of stylistic parameters that go into place, aside from the visual, but musically deciding rhythmically what gets in the way and what can stay in the background, but still keeps people interested.
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. Definitely. Now, Joe, for live theater, I mean, I'm curious because, I don't come from that world. I went to film school. I come from that where it's like, you have time in the editing room to create pacing and and all that. But I feel like it would be kind of comparable to like film editing and pacing and structure is like, okay, here we go. It's like a Lego box. I have it right in front of me. But I feel like with theater, it's like probably building an airplane in a hangar. And it's like, I'm curious, is the pacing and structure kind of there already in the script, and then you kind of tweak it as you do rehearsals and figure out how things are moving? Or do you really you have to kind of see it on stage in motion to kind of figure out, okay, this is where we need to touch? But I'm curious kind of how you manage all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a good amount of that is done through the script development process. And in theater, for the most part, or at least the sort of theater that I write, the script and the songs are being created simultaneously. So it's not like a hole for a song, or I got the song, where can we shove it in the script? It's like all those things are happening together. And so for the most part, the songs you're going to feel kind of organic and tied to the plot and all that. And you can prep as much as you possibly can, but you never really know how it's going to feel until you're in performances. Like you just don't, because that's the only time that you ever have the stuff. Musicals usually exist behind music stands in rooms where someone is reading, and then Oscar fires a gun and a bald eagle falls to its death from the sky. Like, you hear that stage direction for years and years and years. And then suddenly you're like in a room with 1,000 people and you're watching it for the first time, and it just changes everything, So it's always this wild kind of mad dash in like the week that you have before critics start coming to fix any issues like that. And if you need new songs, or or you need new scenes, it becomes such a massive undertaking to change anything, because theater involves so many people. It's like all real time stuff. So it's pretty wild. And it's really just like you can guess and you can try to set yourself up for success, but you don't really know until you're in the room, perform.
But I'm sure the when you see that the final everything together, it must be the most creatively rewarding thing to be sit back and go. Or do you are constantly from night to night going, we can tweak more? I'm curious. Does your brain keep working, or do you like, okay, we have it and I can relax a bit, and I can bask in our creation?
Yeah, no, I've not yet
never achieved it. Never basked.
I'm waiting for my bask moment, because the thing that I love about theater is that it's live, and so it's never the same. And so you make changes, and then somebody forgets a line, or someone has a breakthrough in the middle of a 6-month run, and so it changes. And so for me, like, my mind is constantly going. Like But also there's like such funny, there's sometimes where you end up changing things for like the craziest reasons. We're like in in Hunter, our first act was like it was a little bit longer than we wanted the first act to be, and so we were like at an hour 19, and at like an hour 16, people had to pee. Like it was just like clockwork. Oh, this is when anyone over the age of 70 is going to get up from their seat to go pee, because they have sat for 1 hour and 16 minutes and they have like had it and they're not going to wait. Even though the end of the act is coming in 2 more minutes, they're just not waiting. And so you can't have like a quiet section in this song at that moment, because that is when all of the people who decided that they need to pee will go pee. And so it's like you either have to rewrite that moment or you have to cut 2 minutes earlier. So it's stuff like that that has nothing to do with like the thing that ends up affecting you so hugely in theater, which is something that is both infuriating and I think kind of charming, or at least exciting.
Yeah, because the audience is such an integral part of live theater, because it's when it's but that's fascinating, because like I wouldn't even think of that. Like just like different ages having pee breaks and stuff. That's so funny.
Bladders, man. Yeah,
bladders, those damn bladders. Well, I want to jump over to Stefan. Stefan, action sequences in animation can be really dynamic, and I work with amazing creators at my job, whether it's like Gendy or Adam Muto, and they the way they kind of approach action animation. So I'm curious, how do you approach scoring action scenes to complement the animation's energy and pacing? Because motion and animation is so kind of I guess exaggerated sometimes. So I'm curious if the music ever has to match that, or do you not try to meet that exaggeration? So I'm curious how you approach motion and action and animation and scoring.
I think it depends on the director's approach, because some directors really love that Mickey Mousing effect where you like really accent everything that's going on, and some of them just love that general epic sound while everything is just being ripped to shreds and like not really. So I think it's like determining what the overall mood that they want to go for with it, and then like I'm saying, that boring approach of going in and marking all your beats, but that kind of determines how much time I have to accomplish whatever I'm going to do and to fill in all the material to make it interesting. I think if there's dialogue going on, obviously you don't want to upstaging that. So it still needs to stay, energetic without pushing in the way of that, but like finding that ballet, between that of how to propel the scene without being too intrusive. So I don't know. It's just, it's a really, I don't know. A lot of people ask that question about action sequences, and it's just really hard to define, because it's something that I love doing. Like I love writing action sequences, where a lot of composers really hate it because it's a lot of notes, usually in a short amount of time. And I don't know. I've played in the scoring orchestras for the past 14, 15 years, like on the stages here in LA. I play viola professionally and in the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra. And so I've been on the stages playing a lot of this type of music, regularly. And so that stuff's just in my ears, and a lot of times it's like, like I love what they did in the Avatar score here, or what Hans did in Lion King here. And then you start manipulating it and making it your own. And then you go back to your studio, and then all of a sudden you just wrote like a 3-minute action sequence that just kind of came out of nowhere. Like Batman was kind of like that. The whole movie, there were so many action sequences, and one of them was almost 14 minutes long, which was insane. Wow. But it was just you mark your big beats, you hit those goals, and from that it really determines like what the time is, and you fill in everything else based off of what visually is being represented, or what you can do to propel the scene if it needs something else, if that makes sense. So
absolutely,
it's definitely a ballet.
100%. Yeah. So I know we're kind of coming towards the close of our conversation. So before we wrap up, I do want to jump to Brian real quick and talk about you're working in children's entertainment and children's animation, because as you guys all mentioned, I mean, even Stefan mentioned how you're dealing with phonetic sounds, and there's children's psychology built into it. And we just did our first preschool show with Jessica's Big Little World. And so I'm curious, Brian, and we had like psychologists being consultants and trying to make sure we do the best way of being entertaining but also educational. So Brian, I'm curious, how does that trickle down to the music, especially with the songs?
Well, with Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, it was actually, it's for anyone who doesn't know, it's a kind of a spin-off from Mr. Rogers' Show, which is kind of the king of child psychology shows, and it's created, I guess, taking on his legacy by Angela Santamiro, who also created Super Y, by the way, Stefan, which is cool, and they are the most researched as far as themes, songs, script goes. I've never seen a more researched and focus grouped series than Daniel Tiger, because they'll do script readings to preschool classes. I don't know if they do this now in the 7th season. This was a big in the beginning of the show to get the pacing of it, paying attention if any kids are nodding off or anything like that during the script reading. They play our songs, they play our hooks. We would give them hooks that would later become the choruses of the songs. They play the hooks to the kids and ask, who can sing that back, and so there was really a grassroots research going on at the beginning of that show, and it paid off. The show ended up doing, and it wasn't just obviously music. It was everything, character design, which character do you like best, and every aspect of the show was thoroughly researched and thoroughly focus grouped to the point that I think there's nothing left to chance in Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood anyway, and as a result, kids like it. It's done really well.
Absolutely.
And that was a new thing for me. I don't think I'd ever seen a show taking that approach and all. And we would have a back and forth with them. We had a weekly call. We would send them our songs on a Thursday or whatever, and then the next Tuesday we would talk, and they'd be like, well, this song's not cutting it, this hook isn't memorable enough, and we want you to go take a calmer approach to this, or so it's pretty much it was a conference call every week, for almost a year, just landing on all these things. So it was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating to because at least at Cartoon Works Studios, we try to approach things just a little bit more differently, and just to experience that for the first time. We always did 6 to 11, and now I feel like adult animation is kind of taking over a bit, and that's kind of where the focus of the industry is going. But it's still fascinating to kind of be writing stories for age groups and still trying to be as creative and not pander down to certain ages and do things and still be educational. It's so much work but so fun and collaborative, and I love that so much. But I know we need to wrap up, because you guys are also busy, and I thank you so much for carving time out of your day to do this. So I do want to thank you all so much for all of your insight and all of sharing from your worlds and your musical approaches, and you guys inspire me, and I love all of your work. So it's been such a treat to dive into it. And I want to thank you, Hannah, Joe, Stefan, and Brian for all of your insight, and for being here today. And thank you to Impact 24 for helping put all this panel together. And be sure to head back to Film.Music.Media for some more panels and interviews. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.